Hello and welcome, game designers and future game designers here. We're going to be talking about sprites in GameMaker Studio, and basically we're going to set up shop and do all our stuff right up here. So let's get started looking at the resource tree here. First thing I'm going to do is just right click on that word sprites. Obviously you can create a sprite, you can add an existing sprite, maybe you have one from another game or another resource somebody else made. You can duplicate. Obviously, if I want to click on one of the existing sprites that I have here, you can duplicate it. Insert a group. This is something you can do just to organize your sprite resources. In fact, you have that option in any of the other resources down here. If I want to just insert a group, it's basically a folder. Maybe I want to put, playable objects or non-playable objects, or other things. I don't know, we'll just say player sprites or whatever, but player. And then I can dump any of these things that I want inside that player and collapse it. And it just sort of gets everything organized a little bit more nicely. So, or maybe I don't like that, I can just pull them all out of there, right click on that, and I'm going to delete the group. Yes, I want to delete the group. So anyway, you see some other things here. I can move these around in whatever order. I can also right click up on the sprites and I can sort by name. So now it's going to be SPR ball, Mario, and triangle. So it's alphabetical order. Another thing that we have here, obviously we can delete, we can rename, we can right click, and this will take us to our properties dialog box. We can also get there just by double clicking on the sprite. The last thing, before we actually go into the properties, is I'm going to go all the way over here, Open in Explorer. We're not going to really mess with Open in External Editor. That's if you want to modify it using maybe Photoshop or GIMP or anything like that. So, Open in Explorer. Well, let's see what that does. That's going to actually open up where you have your project saved on your hard drive or your network drive or wherever it happens to be saved. And so mine happens to be saved on C, Users, mGoddard, Google Drive, Video Game Design, Game Build, Sprites Tutorial, and then inside the Sprites folder. In fact, if I look at the go back here, this is in the Sprites Tutorial folder, so all of my files are in here. And then I have there's a file for the configs and all those settings, the objects, and then the rooms and the sprites. So what that took me to is this location. If you notice, GameMaker creates a file for the sprite, which has all the sprite settings, but then there's actually the individual image, and these are some of the images that I'm using. It has all of those saved as PNG files, I believe. Yep, portable network graphics files. So anyway, so all of those are in there. They're, just so you know, they're separate file for the sprite, which has all of the information about the size and the collision mask and things like that we'll talk about in a minute. But then the actual image is stored locally as well. So, going back here, let's go ahead and look at one of our sprites and our sprites properties. Alright, so let's just double click on one of these sprites and look and see what the properties are. Oops, double clicked on that again. Okay, so this is a sprite I created, SPR ball. Obviously, if I want to change what that sprite is, I could load another sprite. I can edit it, which we will do shortly. If we look at the other options here, we've got the width and the height, so this is telling us exactly the pixel dimensions. Then the number of sub-images, which right now is just one because there's only one image. And then the origin, this is where GameMaker is going to, for all practical purposes, assume that your object is. This is the location, or rather, the location of your object is 0, 0. Now it's obviously then 32 pixels wide and 32 pixels down. But this is where the origin is of this particular object. This comes into play because where you put your object in the room, its x and y coordinates or wherever you set this at. For instance, if I click this button here and it centers it, then that now is the origin. And so I can actually go over here and click anywhere I want. But I really like that origin of 0, 0, at least for this demonstration purposes. I'm going to click OK, just because I want to show you what happens if you change this right here. It's somewhere in the middle of your game. So if you notice, I created an object ball and called obj_ball, and I gave it that sprite. Didn't change any of the other settings. I made a room, and if you look here inside the room, I went ahead and put 4 ball objects right there. And if I wanted to, I could put more of them in here, right in the grid lines. Happens to be 32, and this is 32 by 32, so everything's great. In fact, right when I click, it's going to be there, right in that spot. Okay, there we go. And let's say I've got my whole game set up, everything's great, and I hit OK. But then, for whatever reason, I go back and realize, oh, you know what? That origin right there is not really where I want it. I really kind of wanted it in the center. Well, GameMaker is now going to shift each one of those ball objects so that the center is where the origin was at that location. And let me show you what I mean. Click back over on the room, and everything's been shifted, because originally this ball object had its origin at that lattice point where that vertical and horizontal line met right there. Now it's putting the origin there. Still, the origin is still in the same place, but the origin is changed within the ball. So therefore, you can see that all those have shifted, and this can create some really frustrating results in your code. If you already have your whole room set up, or somebody else has the whole room set up, you're working on a team, and everything's moved. So you got to think very carefully about what you're going to do with your sprite and where the origin needs to be, and if possible, you need to have that set in advance, or be prepared to face the consequences. So I've moved it back to 0, 0, and there we are. Everything is nice back where we had it originally. Some other things going down the line here: collision checking. You pretty much never want to check this, precise collision checking, because what that's going to do is that's going to check every single pixel to see if it has collided with every single pixel of another object, and that generates, or utilizes a lot of game resources, and it can really slow your game down if you have a lot of objects. You pretty much never really want to do that. But what you can do is, if you say, oh, I really don't want when this object collides with another object, I want it to actually be where the color of the object is. In other words, I don't want it to, let's click on plus. If something hits right up here against the ball, I don't want it to act like it actually hit the ball. I want it to hit the ball to react when it actually hits the color here. So there is a way that we can do this, and that's by changing the collision mask. So the collision mask is like when you wear a mask, it covers your face, it shows you're somebody different. Well, we can put a mask on this sprite, this image right here, and whenever it collides with something else, it'll collide with it as if it's colliding with the mask and not actually the object, or the image itself. So once again, we can kind of look here at the width and the height. We can see sub-images. There's just one image right here. We could cycle through those different sub-images. This says it gives you the option of separate collision masks for if you had different sub-images, and that's really not a good idea. You just want one collision mask all the time. So bounding box and shape, these two things kind of work together. So automatic is just going to do the whole thing if you have selected rectangle. If we go here to ellipse, okay, hey, that's pretty good. I can change this to full image at this point, but it's really not going to make a difference in the circle because it actually happens to match the circle. So automatic is a pretty good setting, and then figure out which one of these you would prefer, which one is the best. And well, obviously, if you click on precise, now compare precise versus ellipse. Precise, all of a sudden now you're doing precise collision checking, and it's matching pixel for pixel And this is what will slow your program down if you select precise here, or if you selected precise back out there. In fact, when I did select precise there, you can see that automatically puts check marks here, just to be like, hey, 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 watch out. This is going to use precise collision checking. There's actually some articles online that say there is never a correct time to do precise collision checking. So we'll just do an ellipse. And the reason is, you say, well, why does that really matter? Isn't GameMaker going to have to do some super crazy calculations if it's an ellipse? And the answer is, well, not really. They have some interesting algorithms and ways around that so that they can check very quickly if it's an ellipse or if it's a rectangle or if it's a diamond. So ellipse, yep, sounds great for this. Texture settings. This is if you end up tiling your sprite, which I've never done. I've never seen any of my students do it. Maybe you will. I don't have a whole lot to say about that. Texture group is something, if you get really advanced, you have lots of sprites, you can put different sprites in a texture group. And if that becomes an issue, we'll definitely make a tutorial video on what that does. But basically, if you put a bunch of sprites, let's say you have 50 different sprites in the whole game, you can group them into a texture group, and so that not all of them are being pushed into the graphics memory at the same time. Maybe only the sprites that are going to show up in your first room, they need to be loaded into your graphics memory at a time, and so you put them in a little group. That's called a texture group. Then when you go to room 2, those can be swapped out of the graphics memory, and your sprites that are in room 2 will all be grouped together, and that'll fill. And that prevents a lot of what's called texture swaps. And that, like I said, we could have a whole little lesson on that. So there we go. Let's go ahead and just hit OK. And that's, well, I'll get a better idea. Let's go ahead and start editing this sprite and see what we can do with this guy. Okay. So, yep, got the preview right there and the speed. Well, that's not going to really make any difference at this point. But something interesting right down here at the bottom, you can see the frames, you can see the size, and you can see how much memory this is taking up. So, file, we can obviously create a new sprite if we wanted to, create one from a file, add from a file, save as a ping file. If you want to do that, you can modify it. It's automatically going to save as a ping file. Create from strip and add from strip. We'll talk about that at the very end. Maybe even make just a separate tutorial video if this thing runs a little too long. And then, so let's just go down the line here. Edit. You've got your standard copy, cut, paste, erase, add empty, insert empty. Well, now you can add another frame there. So now I've got 2 frames. And if I show the preview, I've got a speed of 1. That's kind of slow here. Let's change that to 15. So that's going to be showing, and of course that's just for demonstration purposes. That's not really how fast it's going to be in the game. How fast it is in the game is, I can determine that using all sorts of mechanisms, like changing the room speed, by changing the image speed, all kinds of things. Pardon me to have the sniffles here. Alright, so I really don't like that image, so I'm going to hit the delete button and delete that. So that's what your insert empty, add empty. That really isn't a whole big deal. Edit, that will take me to the sprite editing menu. We'll look at this a little bit more in depth in a minute. I can also get there just by double clicking on the sprite itself. And then set the transparency background. If you want to go in there, the block pattern, I like that myself because you can kind of see what's going on. Really can't zoom in or zoom out in this point. That's fine. Transformation, you can shift your sprite. I can, let's see, I want to set these back to 0 and 0 so you can see what we can do. Alright, so I could shift it to the right or to the left. Eventually it's going to go all the way off. I can shift it up and down if I really needed to do this stuff. If I want to wrap for whatever reason as I shift it horizontally, if you look here, oh, whoops, wrap horizontally. So there we go, I could wrap it around. I've got the wrap vertically selected, so as I move it up or down, it's going to wrap that. Let's make this back to 0 so we can see that a little bit easier. Okay, and then you could apply this to all the images and sprites if there's different sub-images. I'm going to cancel this because if I start making changes, things are going to go crazy fast. Alright, mirror or flip, well, it's a circle, so if I mirror it horizontally or vertically, that's not really going to change anything. Let me go. Save changes. No thanks. I don't want to do that. Let's go ahead and go over here to my triangle sprite. Edit that. And if I mirror flip it, you can see horizontally, it's almost exactly symmetrically horizontal, but you can see there's slight changes. Flip vertically, there you can see that obviously does exactly what it says it would. Rotate it, I can rotate it as many number of degrees as I want, but once I do that and I hit OK, then boom, there it is. Yuck, I hate that. I don't want that, so I'm going to undo that change. Scale will do just what it says it does. Students normally pick this, and sometimes I mistake this for what I really want to happen. This just changes the size of what you have within the canvas. You can see the canvas is still 32 by 32, but the actual image is changing size. It doesn't. If I wanted to, double or triple the size, well, the problem is that the canvas that is being drawn on is staying the same. So I'm going to cancel that. The much better thing to do, you might say, is okay. I'm going to skip over skew. I'm going to resize the canvas. All right, so I'm going to make it 200 times bigger. All right, so double the size, 200% bigger, so double the size. But that just doubled the background. Okay, I'm going to undo that. Really, the go-to option if you want to stretch is just that. It's stretch. That will stretch both the object and the canvas. So notice if I type in 300 for 300%, it's going to change, basically multiply everything by 3. So I've got 96 by 96. I've got this keep aspect ratio button checked, and let me see if I can show you what happens if I don't. So we're down to stretch. If I don't have it checked and I change this width to 300, then that's just changing the width, and nothing happens to the height. And of course, that's just going to stretch out your image. No, thank you. Let's go to stretch again. But when that check box is checked, then I change this to 300. Then notice the height also changes, so it's going to keep a nice square and everything's proportional. Maintain origin. I mean, right now it's a 0, 0. You want to always double check whenever you do transformations on your image. Double check, go back, check the origin over here. I'll say excellent quality just for fun. That's fine. Great. Okay. Hooray! Now it's bigger, which is what I wanted. It's 96 by 96, and oh, look, the memory's increased. All right. So going back here to our transform options, we can skew it. All right, so we can skew it horizontally. We can skew it vertically. I don't know why you'd want to do these things. Maybe you have some pretty awesome ways to do it, but I haven't had it yet. But of course, I haven't made as many games as I'd like. So then we've got crop. Let me see if I'll show you. Sometimes maybe you have an image you've grabbed from the internet or from a stock file somewhere, and I'm going to resize the canvas. I'm going to resize the canvas to be 250 times %. Okay, so it's bigger. So if your image is kind of stuck there in the middle or up here or anywhere, and all that other space on the canvas is just empty, then what this crop will do is you could say, all right, I want a border size of 10. So that's going to shrink the canvas so that there is 10 pixels, square at least, around your sprite image. A lot of times what you want to do, though, is you want to crop it just to a border size of 0, which will then make everything as snug as possible. And you can see, right, once again, I'm back to my 96. Thank you, Firefox, for interrupting my tutorial here. All right, let's get over some of the neat things here. Images. Okay, cycle left, cycle right. We don't need to do any of that. So black and white does just what you think it does. And I don't want to turn it black and white. Thank you. Colorize, you can change it to a new color. Great. No thanks. I like red here. Colorize partial. Okay, a lot of this stuff you can play with yourself. Intensity, invert, you can change the intensity, you can make it more opaque. You can erase the color. It's better off doing that within the edit menu because you can actually get a lot more technical. So I mean, I'll just show you why. Like the little eyedropper here, well, this is all just one color, so say, all right, I want to make color. Anyway, sometimes your sprite is so small, it's hard to identify exactly what you want to erase. I'm going to cancel that. I don't want to erase anything. But you can work on that from within the edit menu. What I mean by that is when you double click your image, then you'll be able to go in here and you can actually change all the pixels with a certain color, or you can use the magic wand here to select everything of that color. But we'll go back to, we'll see that here in a minute. Smooth the edges. Okay, well, really can't smooth this. It's a triangle, so thanks. But maybe you'll have your image that would be helpful. Opacity, you can set the opacity. You can set the alpha, which is the opacity from a file, if you don't want to set it there. You can fade it. Sure, let's look at that. So fading. Well, it's not really fading. Okay. Let's fade it. You can blur it. Let's blur it. Small, medium, large. I'm not going to mess with this at this point. All right, so sharpen, outline. You can add outline, shadow, glow. You can turn it into a button, which is difficult with this triangle because it doesn't work very well. But you can change the thickness. So kind of, but the thing is, it's basically it just puts a little button layer over top of it. A button that makes it look like a button. But with this being triangular, that doesn't work out very well. Sometimes that does. The gradient fill, you can change it from one color to another. But of course, I'm changing from here to blue, red. There you go. And I can make it so that I can change the transparency, and I can change all sorts of other things. So what it was is I say, I want this color to slowly turn into this color. This is how thick I want it. This is, or solid, or opacity is what it is. I want it to show up, and I want it to follow this pattern. Okay, great. Maybe you'll have some good uses for that. Most likely, you definitely will have some uses for the animation menu right here. So set length says how many frames do you want this? Well, maybe I want a total of 10 frames. There you go. Just made 10 frames of that. I don't really need them all to be the same here. Stretch. Okay, let's see if I type in 5 right there. Hit OK. It does the same thing. It just turns that one image out. I'm going to undo that. Let's do something maybe a little bit of reverse and add reverse. Like, okay, what's that do? Nothing yet. I'll show you a really helpful thing for that. Translation sequence. Okay. So over the course of 5 frames, I wanted to translate, I don't know, 30 horizontal. Great. So slowly. Oh, I know, the speed is 1. That's the problem. Let's make this 30. There we go. No, that's too good. Let's make the speed 20, maybe 10. So there you go. It is shifting and sliding, but of course it goes this one, then this one, then this one, then this one, then this one, and then it wraps back around back to image 0. Okay. Well, I'd like for it to, slowly move to the right, but then maybe come back. Now I can do is I can say add the reverse. Well, yeah, add the reverse. So it goes moving to the right, moving to the right, moving to the right. Then it's going to add I added the reverse sequence to the end of that. So I basically just took image 3 and pasted it right here as image 5. I took image 2 and pasted it right there. So that now you can see it's moving back and forth. Maybe if I undo all of these steps, I could make it rise and then fall. Let's see if we can do that. Translation sequence. Over the course of 20 frames, let's make it go vertical 32. Now you can see there it's from the very beginning it's getting smaller and smaller. It's shrinking. Oh yeah, because I made this 96 by 96. Let's fix that to translation sequence. Over the course of 30 frames, horizontal, I want it to go 96. Oh wait, vertical 96. There we go. Alright. So if I would just to click reverse, so notice right now the preview is showing that it's syncing, syncing, syncing. If I click the reverse, then it took what was down here at the very bottom and it puts it on the top, so it looks like it's going to be rising. Okay, that's pretty interesting. But I don't really like it. I kind of like it where it's falling. But I want it to fall and then I want it to rise back up again. So I'm going to say add the reverse. Now what it's gone down here is, so let's see if we can maximize the screen here for you. So it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, 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 smaller. And then it goes practically to nothing, and then it's 30, and then it goes to rise, 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 gets higher, 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 higher. So that when the time that it wraps back around up to call image 0, it's a nice smooth transition. It's basically here and then here again. So, alright, that's not too bad. In fact, I might be able to speed it up at this point to kind of see what it looks like. Alright, hey, how about that? But at this point, I don't need all that. I just want my triangle. So, this has gone on long enough. I think I'll make another video here in a minute that will show you all the different fun stuff you can do from the image editor. Alright, see you then.